Now, it is my pleasure to bring to the stage our keynote for the day. Prior to being named Archivist of the United States in 2009, David Ferriero served as the Andrew Mellon Director for the New York Public Libraries, where he was part of a leadership team that is responsible for integrating 4 research libraries and 87 branch libraries into one seamless service for users. Prior to that, he also has served top positions in 2 of the largest academic libraries, MIT and Duke. Please welcome to the stage the 10th Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero.
Good morning. First of all, congratulations to the folks at Cisco. John Chambers, a Duke grad, was on the Board of Trustees while I was there, so good work. I'm pleased to be with you this morning, and it's a special pleasure to welcome you all to the DC area, which, as you know, has been the home of the National Archives for more than 75 years when we were founded. For those of you who have never visited the flagship, it's a special treat to welcome you tonight at the reception. Pay close attention to the Declaration of Independence. Although there is no map on the back, as Nicolas Cage would have you believe, there is a handprint in the lower left-hand corner of the charter, and we don't know whose it is, so take a look at it. When Robert Connor, the nation's very first archivist, reflected on his early days in Washington, he reported, "For several months after my arrival in Washington, friends invariably introduced me to strangers with the apologetic explanation, 'Mr. Connor is our first archivist.' With a perfectly blank stare, the other invariably countered with, 'And just what is an archivist?' More than 70 years later, this meeting is one of the few places where I don't have to answer that question. To most audiences today, I still have to explain, no, we're not part of the Library of Congress, and no, we're not part of the Smithsonian Institution. As professional records and information managers, you know what archives are. More importantly, you share with the men and women who work at the National Archives a dedication not only to preserving records, but to making them as useful and accessible to your customers as possible. I have a lot of my staff with me this morning, so would the NARA staff please stand up? And actually, would other federal records managers stand up, please, also? Anyone who does records management in the federal government. At a time when public opinion among Americans about their government is at the lowest it's ever been, take a look at these folks. These are the folks who are preserving and making available the records of the government, and they are one class act, so brag about them to your peers. For the National Archives, of course, our customers are the American people. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them to rights." His words resonate even more powerfully today. To keep a democracy healthy and vibrant in the 21st century, citizens must be well informed. Information, especially about the actions of government, must be circulated, available, and put to use by as many people as possible. At the Archives, this ideal is embedded in our mission. The work we do every day is rooted in the belief that citizens have the right to see, examine, and learn from the records that guarantee their rights, document government actions, and tell the story of our nation. In addition, President Obama has made it clear that this ideal should be part of the mission of all government agencies. Here's how he put it when he issued the Open Government Directive at the beginning of his term. "My administration is committed to creating an unprecedented level of openness in government. We will work together to ensure the public trust and establish a system of transparency, public participation, and collaboration. Openness will strengthen our democracy and promote efficiency and effectiveness in government. Last month, he underlined that commitment when he spoke at the General Assembly of the United Nations and discussed the U.S. National Action Plan for the International Open Government Partnership. The U.S. plan states that the backbone of a transparent, accountable government is strong records management that documents the decisions and actions of the federal government. The President then announced that the administration will soon be launching a new initiative to reform records management, which will seek a reformed digital-era government-wide records management framework that promotes accountability and performance. This, of course, is music to our ears. It's always nice when your boss recognizes the importance of your work. As we gear up for the launch of the President's Records Management Initiative, I thought I would share with you the steps that the National Archives is taking to translate into action our commitment in how we're using the principles of strong records management to promote openness. My focus will be on two aspects of an electronic records management and openness at the archives. First, as everyone in this room knows, electronic records are not only the wave of the future, they dominate the present. And second, ARMA chose the date of this conference very well. You meet here just 17 days after the National Archives achieved a major electronic records management milestone. First, the growing importance of electronic records to our work. Unlike the people who come to Washington to attend an ARMA conference, most tourists know the archives simply as the place where basic documents of American history are housed, such as the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. They're probably unaware that in addition to more than 12 billion document pages, 40 million photographs, and miles of video and film, we have 5.3 billion electronic records, the fastest growing part of our collection. Let me give you just one illustration of that growth. As you know, we operate and maintain all the presidential libraries from Herbert Hoover. The newest in Dallas, George W. Bush, will open in the spring of 2013. And I was very interested to see those early quotes flashing on the screen from the presidents. And I jotted down several of them to check to see if those are really accurate. Especially, ich bin ein CRM. One of my favorite pieces of history in the JFK Library, as a matter of fact, is a little note card that JFK had in his pocket when he gave this speech, and it was a pronunciation guide, basically, to how to say, ich bin ein Berliner. The Presidential Records Act was amended in 1996 to recognize electronic records. So from the Reagan administration, we have about 8 million email messages, 20 million from the Clinton administration, and 210 million from the George W. Bush administration. That translates into some 620 million pages if it were printed, and that's a conservative number. And President Bush loves to brag about the fact that there are so many electronic messages from his administration, and whenever I see him, he always reminds me, and not one of them is mine. As extensive as they are, the Bush emails are, to say the least, just the tip of the electronic iceberg. At the end of September, we hold over 124 terabytes of records from Congress, federal agencies, and the White House. And we've just received 331 terabytes of electronic records from the 2010 census. Keep in mind that as recently as 1989, the total number of electronic records we were responsible for maintaining was just 14,000. Moreover, as every professional records and information manager knows well, the tremendous growth in the volume of records is just part of the challenge. When the archives began receiving electronic data files in 1970, the first ones were primarily simple flat database and ASCII records created by early computers commonly used by federal agencies. In the decades that followed, electronic data was created in a bewildering array of formats, each one wiping out the one that came before. The floppies of our recent past are all but useless. You may remember WordPerfect, Fox Pro, Netscape Navigator, MS-DOS, and my favorite, Epsidic. The good news for the National Archives is that when it comes to electronic records, We've had the benefit of forward-looking leadership, people who anticipated many of the challenges we'd be facing. For example, in 1998, NARA electronics records specialists saw that we'd need a flexible, scalable system so that we could not only store the skyrocketing volume of electronic records, but also handle the wide variety of formats used by federal agencies and the White House. And we would need a system that would allow us to serve our most important customers, the American people, by making electronic records accessible and open over time. To meet those future needs, the archivist at the time, John Carlin, approved launch of a major new initiative, the Electronic Records Archive Project, or ERA. The first phase of the project was to determine what the new system should do. That was when we made the critically important decision, which everyone at this conference can appreciate. Although the primary purpose of ERA would be to preserve electronic records and make them accessible, ERA would also be a workflow system. It would allow federal agencies to conduct records management transactions with NARA electronically. More specifically, the records management part of the system would allow agencies to create records retention schedules and transfer documentation for records in all formats, not just electronic records. That meant that in addition to modernizing records management throughout the federal government, the National Archives could use ERA to collect archival metadata. As a result, from the moment it entered the system, any newly ingested document transferred to us from an agency would be associated with its record schedule and accession information. During the conference, you'll have the chance to hear from NARA staff members who are much better versed in the technical development of ERA than I am. For now, let me give you some of the highlights. NARA received the first functional part of the ERA system for federal records in 2008. It included the basic electronic record storage system at a secure off-site location, connections to NARA facilities, and records management workflow for scheduling and accessioning. And in fact, I now approve records, schedules, and dispositions electronically. It turned out that the presidential records, which the archives would be receiving in January 2009, posed different challenges than other government records. So we decided to create a specialized component of ERA for presidential records. That went live in late 2008 and started ingesting Bush records on schedule in January 2009. We also deployed a simple system specifically designed to meet the needs of congressional records in January 2010. This year, we added a component of ERA designed for the restricted records of the 2010 census and another component of ERA for national security classified records. Both of these bodies of records require special restrictions on access and could not be stored in the base system for federal records. I said earlier that ARMA is meeting here this week, only 17 days after a major e-records milestone for the National Archives. That milestone occurred on September 30th. That was the day NARA concluded the initial development phase of ERA and selected IBM to provide operations and maintenance. So where are we on ERA as I speak to you today? As we enter the O&M phase, ERA is now storing 124 terabytes, as I said, of records from Congress, federal agencies, and the White House. Moreover, working with the Office of Management and Budget, we've embarked on an ambitious plan to have every federal agency adopt ERA for scheduling and accessioning records in all formats by the end of 2012. At that time, all federal agencies will be required to use ERA to schedule and transfer to the National Archives all permanent electronic and non-electronic records. The plan is proceeding in two phases. We're now at the end of phase one, during which we've been working with the 30 federal agencies that are members of the Federal CIO Council. These include most of the cabinet-level agencies, the military services, the Environmental Protection Agency, and others. The goal of phase one is to have all of these agencies using ERA by November of this year. As of September 30th, 23 out of the 30 agencies have started using ERA, a 77% adoption rate. That means each one has at least had staff members go through the training and obtain user accounts, and many have done far more extensive work with ERA. In phase two, our goal is to add about 160 other agencies and agency components of the federal government to ERA by September 2012. Have there been bumps along the way? Of course, and will there be future challenges? I can guarantee it. But we're very proud of the progress that we've made so far with ERA. Less than 2 decades ago, we were storing a few thousand electronic data files. A simple computer program was used to copy each transferred file to a new magnetic tape for physical preservation and to print the start of each file. That was so the archivist could visually inspect the printout to see if the contents of the files corresponded to technical information we had about them. A very tedious process. Public access to electronic records was extremely limited. Records were available only by purchasing copies of the files on magnetic tapes, or in a few cases, ordering printouts of the files. Today, ERA is storing a collection of electronic records so vast that it can be hard to comprehend. For the first time, we're providing federal agencies a way to perform their records management actions with us electronically. It is also enabling a new era of government openness. Late last year, we launched Online Public Access, or OPA. OPA provides a public portal for access to our digitized ERA records, as well as information about records in all formats. You can call it the Google of the archives. I want to emphasize that though we're very proud of how far we've come with ERA, we are just as aware that the journey continues. ERA will evolve as electronic records change and new technology options become available to us. That's what the system was designed to do. ERA will also evolve to help us do an even better job of providing access and openness that are so vital to the functioning of our democratic system. Before closing, I want to report on another breakthrough on the records management landscape, our efforts to recognize the need for a job classification for records managers across the federal agency. Currently, records managers are formally classified in a variety of positions that encompass a wide range of duties and grades. Earlier this year, the Office of Personnel Management proposed the establishment of a new occupational series encompassing management functions related to the Freedom of Information, Privacy Act, and records management. This proposal is consistent with the administration's commitment to transparency in government. Indeed, in order to promote greater transparency throughout government, the administration has identified information management as a high priority occupation. We believe that establishing a new information management occupational series that brings together FOIA, the Privacy Act, and records management positions would improve the recruitment, selection, and development of this critical workforce, elevate the importance of these functions within each agency, and advance professionalization of the field. We're working aggressively with OPM to ensure that the roles and responsibilities of federal records officers are accurately defined and fully represented in the new proposed occupational series. In closing, I'll quote a guy who cared passionately about records and hired Robert Connor, the first archivist, Franklin Roosevelt. In dedicating the FDR Library in Hyde Park, he said, "To bring together the records of the past and to house them in buildings where they will be preserved for the use of men and women in the future, a nation must believe in 3 things. It must believe in the past, it must believe in the future, it must above all believe in the capacity of its own people to learn from the past that they can gain in judgment in creating their own future." We at the National Archives look forward to working with ARMA members to keep learning from the past so we can create a great future for the people and organizations we serve. Thank you. So there are 3 microphones planted in the middle of the room, and I will answer any questions about what I talked about or what I didn't talk about. And I have, as you saw, a lot of people here who know a lot more than I do, since I've only been on the job for 20 months. And could you start by telling me who you are and where you're from?
My name is Tyreen. I'm the chapter president of Oregon. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Imagine 100 years from now, there's an exhibit at the National Archives featuring past archivists. Which personal document of yours would you like to be included in this display?
You know, I can't hear this way. So I heard 100 years, I heard exhibition, but what? Of mine?
Which personal document of yours?
Easy. I have 4. Can I have 4?
As many as you want.
So when I became archivist and I met with the directors of the presidential libraries for the first time, we were at the Carter Library. They went around the room and introduced themselves. And Tom Putnam from the JFK reached into his briefcase and pulled out a facsimile of a letter that a kid wrote to JFK asking for information about the proposed Peace Corps. It's a letter from me. It was an amazing moment, but more amazing was to watch the faces of the other 12 directors because they were, oh my God, how am I going to top this? And 2 weeks later, the Eisenhower called to say they'd found 2 letters from me to President Eisenhower. And when I visited the LBJ, they handed me a copy of a letter that I sent to LBJ congratulating him for signing the Civil Rights Act. So that's what I would like to see in the exhibit. And I actually have those letters framed hanging outside my office because I like to show people this is a concrete example of what we do. We collect, we index, and most importantly, we can retrieve. So apparently, with one of those letters to Eisenhower, they sent me a copy of a letter that Sherman Adams in the Eisenhower White House sent to me, thanking me for my kind letter to the president and the pet elephant. So apparently I sent something along. And as you know, the presidential libraries collect artifacts, so I got on the phone and called Carl at the Eisenhower to say, okay, do you have my elephant? And he said that President Eisenhower usually gave those kinds of gifts to his grandchildren. So not long ago, David Eisenhower was at the archives with Julie with their book about the president. And I told David the story and asked him, so do you have my elephant, David? And he was very quick and he said, you know, my sister Susan probably has it. No other questions? Thank you. See you tonight.